and I pick up pocket kings with about 26k in stack. Okay, this is a good one when the low jack opens up the action to 2500 here. With only 20 big blinds with pocket kings in position, I'm happy to just make the call. The big blind calls as well, so just the three of us to a flop of 874 rainbow. Pretty connected flop, and action checks to me. Not really sure that any of these players actually connected with this board, but still have to bet for value in case somehow someone has anything here. I bet out 3,500, and to my surprise, both players actually call. So surprised by that outcome, but at least we got some action. We're hoping to see a brick turn, which comes the 3 of spades. Okay. Checks to me once again, and I have about 20,000 behind in my stack, and I think I can go either way with an all-in or another small bet. I decided on the latter option where I can bet small, then continue and just go all in pretty easily on whatever river comes. So I decide on 8,500, and sadly, with this sizing, it's not going to get any action. Both picking up aces under the gun, what a sight to see. Maybe bullet number 4 is the real lucky one. I open things up to 3,500 and I get the button and big blind to make the call. So once again, 3 ways to a flop of 954, 2 spades. Here with not a single spade in hand and the best pair possible, action checks to me and I decide to bet out 3,500 once again. It's about a 1/3 sized bet. And the button makes the call, big blind folds. So we're just going to a turn here, which comes a spade. Ew. Not really the card I'm looking to see, as the board is a lot more straightening, and obviously there's a flush out there. Not holding a spade as well, I decided to slow down and do some pot control. I check it over to him, and he thinks the pot control idea is just silly and decides to bet out 7,500. Okay, for this sizing, I'm not going anywhere. Didn't check aces to fold them, that's for damn sure. I stick in 7,500 myself to match his bet. We're going to a river heads up now, hoping to just not see a spade. River comes a brick. It doesn't change the board whatsoever, and I'm going to check inflow. I'm okay with him checking back, to be quite honest, with a board that we're not too proud of or not too happy with. And ultimately, he ends up going all in. Oh, man. He covers me, and I have about 22,000 in stack. It has been a really frustrating day. I don't think that this player is going to be bluffing considering the line that he took. And is there a way that I can ever win here with just one pair? Seems pretty optimistic at this point, but it's aces and we're early in the tournament, so we've got to put our chip stack at risk to hopefully win a big pot here. Come on, let's hold. I make the call and he shows us pocket nines. Ace, queen of hearts in the hijack. There's a straddle on board and I decide to raise it up to $60 here. Get the cutoff to make the call, and then the other last player to act in position of us on the button, he 3-bets to $220. Action folds to me, and he's playing with about 4,000 to 5,000 behind. This is obviously a really good premium to have. Not going anywhere, I decide on making the call, and the cutoff comes along as well. So just the 3 of us, we're out of position though. When the flop comes King Jack 5 rainbow with 1 heart, action checks to the button player who bets out small for $200. Facing this 1/3 pot sizing with an overcard, a gut shot straight draw to Broadway, along with the backdoor flush draw, definitely have a lot going on for my hand and good removal to a hand like Ace King as well. That's a pretty strong top holding. Anyways, for all those reasons said, I make the call for $200 and the cutoff gets out of the way. We're going to a turn, hoping to improve. It's the 9 of diamonds. Wrong red card for us, dealers. But now that Queen 10 is the nuts, not that relevant here. I check it over to him, and he bets out $900. Yeah, I'm out. I'm going to X-way, $50, no limit hold'em, 1 board, bomb pot. Bomb potting it, we go with $300 in the middle. We're off to a flop, which comes 10-6 deuce, 2 spades, and I look down at a premium, good-looking 6 deuce offsuit. Good enough for bottom 2 pair, and the small blind here, first act, bets out $60. Then, next to act, to my right, raises to $260, and now it's on to me. Wow. It's really weird here in this spot as the small blind is leading into the entire field, which seems like he has a pretty strong hand. Then when the big blind raises him, he must have an even stronger range. But with two pair here, I certainly can't fold, and now it's a question of raising or making the call. And ultimately, I think raising is a little bit of an overplay with only bottom two pair, as we can lose to 10-6, 10 deuce, and some sets. Anyways, for 260, I just make the call. Action folds all the way around back to the small blind player, who decides that $260 is not enough. He puts in another raise, 3-betting it up to 880. The big blind now folds pretty quickly, and he just made a complete mess of this hand and wants to abort mission. Now it's on to me now. I'm in position now at least, and I think this is really tricky. Like I said, this is super strong for him to do this with, and I don't think he's going to be bluffing here. The other issue is that I hold the 6 of spades in my hand, so this player can't even have a semi-bluff like a pair and flush draw. So there's a lot of merit to just folding here, and especially with how the night's been going, I kind of want to do that. But I have two pair, and it seems like a sin to fold two pair on the flop so far, so how about I just make the call and maybe fold on bad runouts? That's the plan I have in mind. I'm going to be sticky for now and call, but definitely not feeling great about it. So when I make the call, we're going to a turn heads up, which comes the 4 of diamonds. And on this board, that doesn't really change the board a whole lot. He continues once again, this time to $1,540. Holy crap. Today has been pretty damn horrible when it comes to cards, and I really wouldn't be surprised here if I'm beat, considering how much strength he's repping right now. In game, you won't really believe it, but I really wanted to fold this one, but ultimately, I end up just sticking it in, $1,540. I make the call with a good amount to play for behind as well. Pretty much just hoping to fade a spade and also hoping that he only has a spade draw. We're off to a river, which comes the disastrous 5 of spades. 4-liner on the board, flush draw gets there, and I don't think I beat a single thing. Anyways, he actually checks to me, which is a huge sigh of relief. Maybe my hand can be good here, but I'm happy to just get this to showdown. No need to bet because I don't really get called by much worse. I check this one back, and he surprisingly shows us Queen 10 for just top pair. And my 6 deuce is going to win it, so queens on the button, and that's not even the best part. The better part is that there's a $20 straddle, thank God, and a $40 straddle. So playing 5, 10, 20, 40 here, and I have queens. There's an early position limp of $40, then the hijack raised to $160. This is the same player that I actually beat last time who overvalued top pair. And when the cutoff makes the call, let's have a lot of fun. Seems like there's a lot of money in the middle and a lot of people interested in this pot. I decided to put in a 3-bet and raise it up to 650. Action folds all the way back around to the hijack, who raised pre-flop and announces these 2 magical words. Right? The cutoff folds, and I have lost every single all-in pot with a big pair today in this tournament. Let's not lose this one, as he has about $2,500 in his stack. It is worth more than one tournament buy-in that I've stacked off with today, so let's make one of those back. I snap it off and make the call. This player wants to run it twice, and I'm always happy to oblige to however many times you want to run it. It doesn't really change much, and let's go to 2 runouts. First runout comes a set. Wow, that's fun. And the second runout, I river the nut straight. Wow. That looks pretty good for pocket queens, and there it is. I show my hand, he mucks, and I win. I pick up queens once again. Unfortunately, not as lucky this time as there's no straddle, but I'm in the big blind, and there's a +2 open to $30. The cutoff makes the call for 30, and action folds to me. Another really great spot to 3-bet with a premium, and everyone's playing so deep, I decide to 3-bet to $170. The +2 player folds, which is interesting, and that allows the cutoff player to make the call, so I can't expect this player to have this strong of a hand calling twice pre-flop. We're off to a flop of King 10-7, 2 diamond, and a spade. With a king high flop with pocket queens out of position, I certainly could bet a lot of the time, but in game, I decided to check, and this player takes a long time before checking it back himself. So not expecting him to have too strong of a hand. We're off to a turn, which is the king of spades. 2 flush draws out there, a bunch of straight draws available as well, and certainly could bet, but I decided to check for a second time, Maybe he can bluff at this. I'm not sure what he's taking so long to make a decision about on the flop, but he snap checks it back, so definitely doesn't have a whole lot. We're going to a river, which comes the 9 of spades. The backdoor spade draw gets there, and I have to bet now for value. This was a very weirdly played hand to start off with, and even weirder, I actually elect to overbet the pot. I 2x the pot to $700, hoping to get called by a 10, 7, 9, and he does call, and it's a snap call at that. Instantly calls. I show my pocket queens, and it's good. Wow. Pretty nice instance where the overbet worked after checking flop and turn. This was a pretty weird line, to be quite honest with you, but I'm happy that the last 3 hands of the session all worked out and we're scooping chips my way.
38K in my stack, just down a little bit from starting. The low jack makes it 600 and I call on the button with jack 9 of diamonds. Standard defend for me here and the small blind calls as well. We go 3 ways to jack 7-6, flopping top pair, weak kicker. The low jack c-bets 1.2k, repping a stronger hand, particularly when betting multi-way, but we can't release just yet. I make the call and so does the small blind. The turn's the king of diamonds, potentially an action killer or potentially a card that the low jack can rep. However, it checks to me and I decide to just check it back. Could potentially bet here to deny equity, but I don't think it's necessary. The river's the deuce of hearts. Low jack bets 2.2k now, and I don't really love this spot. He's certainly repping only hands that are better than mine, but I'm not convinced people really bet second pair here often enough, and I think a king X would generally try to protect its equity on the turn. So I decided to make the call and the small blind folds, but the low jack was getting thin here with queen jack, so he gets a nice value bet in there and I have to ship it over to him. In retrospect, I think this is really close and it probably is okay to fold in a live environment, although these multi-way spots are very tricky and it's sometimes hard to find the line. Most of my stronger hands in this I would have bet on the turn, so it's kind of hard to fold. In this next hand, 34k in the stack at the same blind level and the hijack makes it 600. I'm in the big blind with 10 deuce of diamonds, and while this is a pretty ugly hand, in this spot I'm going to be defending. I make the call. The flop also bails me out. King 10 deuce with 1 diamond and 2 hearts. I check, he bets 700, and I decided to check raise here because it's a draw heavy board. I'll have plenty of bluffs and I expect the pre-flop raiser's range to have plenty of connecting sorts of hands with this board. I make it 2.5k and he folds ace king face up. He tells me that nobody would muck that hand but him. I just chuckle and tell him that he's definitely right. Kind of insane to have him get away, but what can I really do? In this hand, 200, 300, 300 blinds here, and I am already chipping up. I open kings to 800 in the low jack, and the small blind and the big blind both call. Flop comes down 9-8 deuce. I c-bet 1.2k, and the big blind check raises to 3.5k after the small blind folds. I make the call, not really willing to give it up yet, and the turn is the 5 of hearts. He now bets 4.5k, leaving 18.5k behind. It doesn't really feel like he's going to find too many folds here, and I'd like to deny equity to his draws. Technically 7-6 comes in, but besides that, there's still plenty of draws available, and I'm not losing to too many hands. Even the hands I am losing to, it's pretty hard for me to get away from the river unless a bad action killing card comes out, and I'm not really wanting to rely on that. So I jam. Feels pretty close, but he tanks for a really long time and just folds. Maybe he did have a draw, but something on the weaker side like Jack 10 or Queen Jack. Not really sure, but we're chipping up here. 80k in the stack now, 300, 600, 600 blinds. And the hijack, who's an active and capable player who is from the king-king hand that we just talked about, makes it 1.5k. I'm in the big blind and I have ace-6 offsuit. I make the call. Flop comes out ace high, ace-queen 7 two-tone. I decide to check, and I'm not really gonna have a leading range on this board ever. So when he bets 1.7k, I just make the call. Turn is the deuce of spades, bringing in a backdoor flush draw, 2 flush draws on board now. And when I check, he bets 3.5k. Telling the story that he has a really strong hand here. However, I'm not really willing to get rid of an ace just yet. If he puts out a big bet on the river, I might have to release, but I'm not sure. I make the call now though, and the river's the queen of spades, bringing in the backdoor flush as well as pairing the second card on the board. I check and he now bets 8.5k. I'm really not so sure he would go this thin with many of his ace-X. I feel like he has plenty of hands that are just missed draws because the front door draw missed, and the fact that the ace is a spade on the board as well limits the number of flush draws that he can even have. On top of that, I don't think there's a whole lot of queen X that would realistically bet flop and turn, so I'm really starting to look at a very thin value range with a fair amount of available bluffs. I don't think my blockers are too relevant here. Maybe I'd rather not have the 6 of hearts, but c'est la vie, I don't think I can let this one go. I make the call and he announces king high, so I just show my hand and win. He most likely had king jack or king 10 for a straight draw, or possibly something like king 9 or king 8 of hearts. Probably should have forced him to show this one since he's a capable player, but oh well. Early position limps in, and it's a little bit hard to explain how he plays, but he pretty much 5x's it with his big pairs, raises small, and folds to 3-bets sometimes, probably with the weaker part of his range, and then does a fair bit of limping as well. I have black pocket 6s next to act, and I bump it up to 3.5k, not really wanting to see a super multi-way limped pot. He makes a call, and we go heads up to a flop of 5-4 deuce. He checks. I decide to c-bet 3k, wanting to protect my equity here, but he surprises me by jamming 28.6k. Massive shove here, and this is not a comfortable spot. He definitely has hands like 7s, 8s, 9s in range, at least at some frequency, but he's also got flush draws and hands like pocket 3s. The sets loom large as well though, so I'm not feeling very comfortable, but with my gut shot to back me up and not blocking flush draws in the slightest, I decide I have to call. It helps that just looking at the guy, he doesn't seem that strong, but it's still unnerving to be in a spot like this for a massive portion of our stack. However, he turns over pocket 3s. Insanity. We are in absolutely insane good shape here to stack him. The turn is a 3 of hearts, giving him a set, but it gives me a straight absolute drama card because he can still hit a full house. And the river is a king of hearts, so I win this massive pot. At this level, this sort of pot means a lot. Even though we won that big one, I've played several hands in between and have chipped back down. There's a couple tough players at my table now. 130k in the stack. This hand is blind versus blind with Mike Martyr, who, if you don't know him, is kind of like an East Coast reg, very solid. I think I've played with him at Maryland Live probably like a half dozen times, and I'm in the small blind. I have 8-3 offsuit, and while this is a really trashy hand, a lot of times what I'll do in this position is open my really weak hands and my really good hands, and then limp call or limp raise some hands in between. I make it 3k, and Martyr calls in the big blind with around 40k to start the hand. The flop comes out 3-3 deuce. This is just a miracle flop for me. I decide to c-bet small, 1.5k, and he makes the call. The turn is the 5 of hearts, and I feel like while I still have some of the strongest overpairs that he can't hold, a lot of my range will just want to check here and maybe realize some equity. So I decide to check. He bets 8k, and I happily make the call, not wanting to blow him off of bluffs. He's too capable of a player, and there's just too few strong holdings for anybody to have here. I don't want to check raise. On a river jack of diamonds, I check, and he jams 29k. I just can't fold this spot. Yes, he's repping hands that beat me for the most part, and yes, there are a number of ones that do, but it just doesn't matter. I say you're too good for me to fold. I call, and he has queen 7. So pretty interesting one where we both had relatively sort of garbage hands to start, and I just got super lucky to, find the right player, find the right flop, and kind of play it in a way where he was willing to stack off and put me to the test. To his credit, if I'd had anything significantly weaker, this would have been an incredibly tough spot to be in, and I probably would have found myself folding a little bit too often. Up and chipping up, 215k in the stack now, 600, 1200 blinds. Middle position opens to 2.5k. The button flats with around 55 to 60k behind, and I have queen 9 of hearts in the big blind and happily overcall. The flop comes 9-8-6 with 2 hearts, so the insanity of flops continues. I check, middle position checks, and the button bets 5k. I decide that this hand is a little too good. I can actually get action against better and worse flush draws, as well as other one pair holdings, so I decide to check raise 18.5k. Trying to push my equity advantage wherever it may be. Middle position folds and the button just jams. I obviously have to snap here, but he actually has 8-6 of diamonds, so it's definitely close. I might technically be a very slight equity favorite, but it's really close to a flip. The turn is the 5 of hearts, immediately giving me a flush, and his only hope now is 4 outs to a full house. The river does not pair the board. It's another heart, the king of hearts, and I managed to chip up once again. After 1K, 2K, 2K blinds now, and 260K in the stack, so still staying above that 100 big blind level. I'm under the gun +1 with pocket sixes, and I opened at 4.5K. The small blind is the only caller, so we go heads up to a flop of 8-4-3 two-tone. He checks. I decide to c-bet 4K, pretty much because I'll do that with most of my range here, and he makes it 18K. I don't really think we can fold just yet. It's a board where people are allowed to sort of check raise top pairs from a theory perspective, but a lot of live players don't do this at a very high frequency, and there's so many draws available, I'm happy to continue. On a turn 4 of clubs, he rips 55K. Now it's really not a fun spot to be in, but looking at him, he just seems super nervous. I mean, this stuff is hard to quantify sometimes, guys, but I felt pretty confident. Granted, he can have something like diamonds with 2 overs where it's not like I'm a lock to win the hand, but I do decide to make the call, and somehow he has pocket 5s. I'm in absolutely insane shape here, and on a river 4 of hearts, I win, chipping up substantially and continuing my chip lead of this event. Early position opens to 6K off of about 100K. The hijack calls, and the small blind jams 45K. I look down at pocket kings in the big blind. I look around and I'm thinking to myself, man, early position opener looks just so strong. He's breathing super hard. He seems really interested in the fact that the small blind has jammed. And at this point, he's got another more than 50K on top of what small blind has. It really, really feels like early position has aces. But what if I'm wrong? What if he just has queens? I don't have enough info here. I haven't been at the table long enough. I don't feel confident, even though it really screams aces to me. I jam. I just can't get away from it. He hems and he haws because the player behind him is still left to act. But it's so clear to me when he tanks, it's aces. I'm just waiting for the bad news. He does eventually stick it in. The last player does fold. And of course, early position has pocket aces. So I'm drawing to just 2 outs here or some weird straight draws. The big blind turns over ace king, killing one of our outs immediately and pretty much signing a death sentence to our amazing stack. The flop rolls out 10-5-3, and it's just, oh man, it just feels so bad. Like you're just chip leading so much of the day. You're feeling so good, making so many good decisions, it feels like. And then you just get into the spot where you could have gotten away, where you could have. And you were so close to folding, but just couldn't find it. And then the turn is the king. The case king falls on the turn. This is such an insane turnaround. You couldn't have scripted it. There is only one card in the deck that could kill my pocket kings and this set. It doesn't fall. It's a brick on the river. Someone later told me that he folded the last ace in the deck, and we end the day with 545,500 chips.
About 10 minutes in, I'm still getting situated and we pick up pocket kings on the button. At least I think I'm the button, because we see that big button looking thing in the top left. That's actually the bomb pot button. I'm in the small blind. With the session just starting, me playing in a big game, getting pocket kings, and trying to get the camera set up all at once, I'm a little distracted. Under the gun +1 raises to 55. I played with this opponent the day before and know that he's a wild guy. He also knocked Doug out of the main event a few days prior after calling a 3-bet with 8-3 offsuit and flopping trips. I must avenge Doug. I 3-bet to 160. I would have made it 200 if I had realized that I'd be playing this from out of position. The opponent calls, we're going heads up to the flop. It's reminiscent of what the judges gave me for my mime act during my high school talent show. That's right, all 10s. The act was sick, I was in a box and everything. We flop an interesting full house. If my opponent has a pocket pair below 10s, he's drawing dead to run a runner perfect. I down bet to 125 in order to string the opponent along as if I'm walking the dog with a yo-yo. The opponent complies and makes the call. I'm already trying to think about how I can extract maximum value throughout the rest of the hand. The turn is the 6 of diamonds. It's a great card. I don't want to see anything above a 10 come out, not even a king. I increase my sizing to 475. Under the gun +1 isn't deterred by my bet. Only about 10 seconds go by before he calls. As we're getting further into this hand, I'm suspecting more and more that my opponent has exactly queens or jacks. Or quads. If he flopped quads and I get stacked, I can live with that though. The river is the 4 of clubs. It's another card that doesn't change a damn thing. The dealer could have just put his business card out there instead. I'm going to bet, and I'm going to bet big to target worse pocket pairs. I make it 1,500. I actually wouldn't have minded jamming for about 3,300 total. You can't really fold queens for that amount since that's the second best hand that I'll ever have other than 4 10s. Under the gun +1 is clearly distraught at the moment. He's not sure what to do. He has no phone a friend lifeline at his disposal. I'm rooting hard for a call, but maybe 1,500 was a bit too greedy. Maybe it wasn't greedy enough. The opponent matches the bet. We show him the 2 cowboys. They're more than good. We never find out what under the gun +1 has, as his cards are returned to the dealer face down. We're up over 2,000 immediately. We win back more from the opponent than he got from Doug's tournament buy-in. Doug has been completely avenged. It seems like we're up a lot. After all, it's an amount more than 200 big blinds. 20 minutes after that debacle, we pick up King 9 suited in the $10 blind. We'll just call it under the gun since we have 2 other players in the blinds to our right. Under the gun +1 straddles to 20. The button raises to 60. His name's Matt. I played with him a handful of times in Texas. He's maybe the best cash game player in town. With the straddler behind me, I'm treating this as if I'm in the small blind, and I 3-bet to 200. Had I had an opportunity to close the action, I would have just called the initial raise. Under the gun +1 doesn't see that I 3-bet and calls to 60. Once he realizes it's 200 to call, he wishes that he could have folded. It's another strange situation because he's not really supposed to be allowed to take his 60 back. Matt is a stickler for the rules and tries to clear up the confusion by chiming in. I don't want to win someone else's money that he genuinely put in as a mistake, so I want to try and let him know that if he folds and I win the pot, I'd give him back his $60, but I don't want to make it seem too much like I want the opponents to fold.
140 to call, 0 to fold. No, that's yours.
You called 60.
You called 60.
If I win, we'll see what happens. I guess.
I'll give you. Okay, now we're all just playing poker.
Under the gun +1 makes things simpler by calling. Matt calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop against someone who I think has a bad hand and someone who I think has something mediocre, like a low or medium pocket pair, suited connectors, or suited Broadway cards aside from ace king or maybe even ace queen. The flop comes king queen 5 rainbow. We've got top pair and a backdoor straight flush draw. What's better is that I have a huge range advantage with 2 Broadway cards out there after 3-betting and only getting called. I'll have extremely strong hands like sets of kings and queens, as well as aces and ace king that my opponents almost definitely won't have. After under the gun +1 showed hesitation before ultimately calling the 3-bet for 140 more, it's unlikely that he'd even have a set of 5s, and probably won't have king queen, which are the only super strong hands that the button could have. With us having a king, there are only 2 combos of king queen suited that the button would have definitely called a 3-bet with. I suppose he probably would have called pre-flop with king queen offsuit as well, but that's still only a total of 6 king queen combos and 3 set of 5 combos that I need to be concerned about him raising me with. Because of that, I can sort of bet with impunity here. I make it 350. Under the gun +1 folds right away. The button is contemplating how he wants to proceed. Eventually he calls. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 8 of clubs. I would have preferred it to be a heart. Not a bad card though. At this point, it's tough to be sure if we're ahead or not. We're losing against a set of 5s, king queen, king jack, and king 10, but we're ahead of ace queen, ace 10, jack 10, perhaps queen jack and queen 10 suited type of hands as well. Maybe even some 10-9 or 7-6 suited hands also. I go very large with my sizing since I have the range advantage and good card removal against a lot of combos that are beating me. I bet 1,200. This amount charges the button significantly for draws, particularly if he has clubs and doesn't want to fold. If the button has 2 pair or a set and happen to be trapping on the flop, I'd expect to hear from him right now. He just calls, making me think that he either has exactly 1 pair or some sort of strong draw. The river is the deuce of hearts, it's a complete blank. What's interesting about the board run out and the way that this hand has been played so far is that I don't think the opponent is going to want to put any more money in the pot regardless of what his actual holding is. If he has a missed draw, he won't be calling a bet, although if I check, he may jam for 34.50 effective in a last-ditch effort to steal the pot from me. He's a good enough player to know that shoving on the river wouldn't make a ton of sense though, and I'll certainly check as a trap on occasion with really strong hands. If the button has something like ace queen or queen jack of clubs, he would surely check back. If he has king jack or king 10, he'll be checking back as well since this pot has gotten large and I probably wouldn't call a bet of his with anything worse. The button may call a small or medium sized bet with king jack or king 10, but he won't love it after I 3-bet and bet all 3 streets. It'd be only a bluff catcher. Since I anticipate only being up against holdings that can't call large bets, I consider turning my hand into a semi-bluff of sorts, in the sense that if I jam for 34.50, I expect to be ahead half the time or more, but the hands that I put my opponent on that are beating me will almost for sure have to fold, so I'm bluffing him off of those. The opponent throws his cards into the muck immediately. I imagine that we had the best hand and didn't necessarily need to turn top pair into a bluff. It just all but guaranteed that we'd win the pot unless the opponent could find a difficult call, which is a slightly better one pair. Typically, I don't turn hands with value into big bluffs. This was just a unique situation in which I felt in the moment it was going to give us the victory a huge percentage of the time, particularly after everyone at the table saw me overbet for value on the river earlier with pocket kings after I 3-bet pre-flop there too. Matt is a great guy and is cool enough to share what he had for the vlog.
Jack 10.
Ace 10 of clubs.
Back to poker, we pick up Queen Jack suited in the cutoff. There's a $20 straddle on. Under the gun +1 limps in. The hijack calls as well. I raise to 100. The dude who I got earlier with pocket kings and who knocked Doug out of the tournament with 8-3 offsuit, 3 bets to 305. It folds back to me. My brother actually just landed in Austin to check out the lodge and hang out, so part of me wants to lock up a win for several thousand and head out without getting involved in any more big pots. I know that I shouldn't be making decisions based on that, so I call for 205 more. We're heads up in position. The flop comes 10-6-6 rainbow with 1 club. We don't have much except 2 overs and some backdoor draws. The big blind only bets 160. I'm getting 4-1. I call, hoping to improve, or perhaps I can steal this down the line. The turn is the 8 of spades. That gives us a gut shot straight draw. The big blind slows down and checks. This is a pretty good board for my 3-bet calling range. I can have quads, full houses, and trips, as well as hands like ace 10 and king 10. I take a stab at it for 425 in order to get the opponent to at least fold his ace high hands. The big blind calls pretty quickly. He could have an overpair and just checked for pot control. He may have continued betting with spades, so I don't think that it's very likely that he check called with a flush draw. The river is the 9 of spades, giving us the best possible straight. Now I'm really hoping that we're up against an overpair. The big blind checks again. If I had missed, I was considering bombing it as a bluff. No need to do that anymore. I bomb it for value. I make it 1500, the same price that I made it against him the last time that we tangled several hours ago. This player's had a rough day so far. Not only did I get the best of him earlier, some other people have gotten him as well, and now I've just made a backdoor straight against him in a 3-bet pot that's had betting on every street. If he calls, he's not going to like seeing Queen Jack. He doesn't call. Instead, he rips it all in for 37.20. I wasn't expecting to see that. I feel like throwing up. It's just over 2,200 more for me to call. I'm playing against a wild dude who stuck piles against certain people, and in certain situations, this is an easy fold. I'll still be up about $1,000 if I let this straight go. Still, it's difficult for me to put together what my opponent is trying to say with his river check shove. I don't even think that he's attempting to rep a flush. He's basically saying that he has a full house. There's only one full house combo that makes much sense to me.
So pocket 9s?
I've seen this guy make some aggressive plays, particularly in the 2-5 game that I played with him yesterday. In the back of my mind, I also had this text conversation that I had with my friends 20 minutes prior to this hand. We see my friend Nick Durkee say, "Don't play prevent defense, it doesn't work." With that thought swirling around, and against this opponent whose hand I can't quite piece together, I call. It turns out I actually was able to piece his hand together. He has the exact one that I called out. 9s full of 6s for a river full house.
Alright.
Successfully bluff catch an opponent, then pick up ace 3 suited on the button. The very next hand, Matt raises to 75 in the hijack. By the way, we've changed the game to 5-10-25. I can mix in 3-betting and calling in this situation. I call, we're heads up in position, the flop comes ace 6-3 rainbow, we've got top and bottom pair. The hijack checks, I bet 125 for value. The hijack calls, the turn is the king of spades, giving us the nut flush draw. The hijack checks, I bet 400 when a card comes out that will usually be much better for the pre-flop aggressor. Matt doesn't believe that I've got it. He calls, the river is the 8 of spades, giving us the absolute nuts. The opponent checks. What a dream this is. When I make strong and hidden backdoor hands, I like to bet large. I make it 1100. It could look like I'm trying to buy the pot, especially since Matt has played this passively. He goes into the tank for a long time without saying anything, then finally breaks the silence.
I'm not supposed to call, but I'm a little bit suspicious.
A call from the opponent would actually get me unstuck. I'd be up $200 on top of what Craig gave me. After a full minute, Matt makes the correct decision and folds. The rest of the table is curious whether or not we had it. Just 5 minutes later, we pick up pocket jiggities in the cutoff. There's a $50 straddle on, and since it's a 3-blind game to begin with, we're first to act. I raised to 150. The button calls. The small blind is a pro named Hunter. He has over $1 million in tournament earnings. He's also an instructor for Check Shove Poker. He's the author of Advanced Concepts No Limit Hold'em, a modern approach to poker analysis. Hunter 3-bets to 700 with a stack of 4,800 total. Tough situation for me. There are a few things to consider. One is that Hunter was set up nicely to 3-bet squeeze after the button just flatted my initial pre-flop raise. This makes me think that he could have 3-bet me on the lighter side. Also, I don't want to call and give the button a good price to call behind, making it so we potentially have to play this hand from out of position. I've got the 4th best hand in poker. There are plenty of hands that I could have gotten 3-bet by that are worse than mine. I'm okay racing against a hand like Ace-King as well. If I happen to be up against aces, kings, or queens, that's a bit unlucky. I 4-bet jam for 4,800 effective. The button folds quickly. If I get called by the small blind and win, I'll be at the high point for the day. Even if it folds through, I'll have 300 more than I walked into the card room with. Hunter's perplexed, which I'm very happy about. I can rule out him having pretty much everything that beats me or is flipping with me. It's never all that fun to 4-bet shove with jiggities. This time, the play works out, the small blind folds, we get the victory without having to see a flop. Next we've got Queen 8 suited in the small blind. I actually got a nice bluff through right before this to be winning on the day, even beyond the purple chip gift. I raised to 85. Under the gun calls, this is the Lodge ownership group's nemesis. He got Doug, I avenged Doug, then he got me for more than I avenged Doug for, so he's up all the YouTube money right now. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes King, Queen, Jack, Rainbow. Pretty good flop since we'll have all the sets in our range that the opponent won't have. He can still have some 2-pair and straight combos though. I'd like to get our second pair to showdown as cheaply as possible. I check. Under the gun is sort of playing by the rules. He bets 50. That's a reasonable amount. I call. The turn is the deuce of hearts. It's as blank as it gets. I check. This time, under the gun bets 200. Second pair is an okay candidate to call 2 streets with. I put 200 in the middle. If I face a third barrel, I'll just fold. The river is the 8 of clubs, improving our hand to 2-pair. It's a sneaky 2-pair as well. I check. I'm planning to call any normal size bet. The opponent fires for 1,300. That's not a normal size bet. I've got great card removal to the other 2-pair hands. I played this passively, and the river helped me improve to just about the best hand that I'd ever play this way. Does this guy just always have monsters against me? I'm not sure. I call to find out. We get the bad news. The opponent flopped the nuts with ace-10 of diamonds.
Yeah.
Here we've got Jack 4 of clubs and the under the gun +1 straddle. It's another 5-10, 25-50 hand. Hunter's out to get revenge against me. He raises the 200 from the small blind. I'll give him an opportunity to get some of his money back. I defend the straddle. We're heads up in position. Every one of these pots we're playing has the potential to get huge quickly. The flop comes Queen 9-6 rainbow. We've got nothing except backdoor draws. The small blind bets 300. We've got position and a lot of cards that can help us on the turn. The opponent could just be taking a stab at it and will give up on future streets, allowing us to possibly steal it later. I call one time to see what develops. The turn is the king of diamonds, giving us a straight draw. We also have pretty good card removal, making it less likely that we're up against a straight or a hand like king jack or queen jack. The small blind slows down and checks. So far, this is going about how I drew it up. I just need to bet, have Hunter fold, and stack the chips. I make it 850 to mostly represent a straight. I could also play some sets and 2-pair hands this way as well. Hunter goes off script. He calls. He wasn't supposed to do that. It seems that he may have a hand like ace-queen or queen-10. The river is another king. The small blind checks. I hope that he didn't check call on the previous street for pot control with a king, then improved the trips. We've completely bricked. We've got about the worst hand that we'll ever have. Don't worry about that though. Think about the hands that we could have that we would have played this way, like king-queen, king-9, pocket 9s, pocket 6s, and jack-10. I may even play king jack or king 10 this way as well. Once the small blind check calls the turn, he's going to have very few of those hands. My goal is to appear strong and get the opponent to fold. I announce a bet of
1,800. 1,800.
This should look like we're going for pure value. It should look like we want to get called. When I bet rivers for similar amounts previously at this table, even though they were for larger percentages of the pot, they mostly have been for value. I want Hunter's hands containing a queen to fold. If this play gets through, it'll put me well above the even mark, and it'll get the stack into 5-figure territory. A full minute goes by, and a top-level pro with multiple 6-figure scores from WSOP and WPT final tables is no closer to coming to a decision. While he's tanking, no one says a word in order to allow him to concentrate. There's a big pot and a friendly table, so no one's considering calling the clock either. I'm trying to remain as still as I could possibly be to not give anything away. After almost exactly 2 minutes of tanking, Hunter finally decides that he can find a better spot and he folds. We get the biggest complete bluff through of the day. This one feels unbelievable after the roller coaster that we've been on. If you get one last chance with pocket 10s the very next hand, I raise a 75 from the button. The small blind, who's the same opponent who just got me in the bomb pot, 3-bets to 300. using the money that he just won from our stack. Calling is the most reasonable play. I put 225 more out there. We're heads up in position. The flop comes king 10-8 with 2 clubs. We have a set and the second nuts. Small blind bets 325. There's too much going on with this board for us to slow play. I raise to 1,000. Small blind thinks for 30 seconds. Then he calls. I'm hoping that he has ace king and not ace queen because the jack of spades comes out on the turn. It's a terrible card for us. 3 different straights get there, and a set of jacks is beating us now too. Plus, there are 2 flush draws on the board. Small blind checks. While a big part of me is concerned that we're already beat, I can't allow hands like ace king, king queen, queen jack, king jack, and flush draws to see free cards. I bet 1,700. Now we wait. It's possible that we'll get raised or jammed on. I don't know if I'll be able to fold if that's what happens. I'm nervous since I don't know where we're at in this. People keep showing up with nuts, or in the case of the last hand, the nuts twice. After well over a minute, the opponent finally folds. He obviously didn't fold anything better than our set, but I'm somewhat relieved that we don't have to fade a river card.